Hello and welcome to 60OF Reviews. It's impossible to approach Asgards-drifts 2 without feeling the sheer weight of expectations that Sanzaru games have had to deal with, having released the first Asgards-drifts, a game that was critically acclaimed on PC VR and rightly considered one of the few AAA games made explicitly for VR. A lofty space it essentially shares with little but Half-Life Alyx, Lone Echo, and arguably Stormland. Asgards-drifts was considered such a VR milestone that barely 6 months after its release, Sanzaru Games was acquired by Facebook to operate under Oculus Studios. Since then, they have been hard at work on Asgards-drifts 2. But how do you impress people with a sequel for an outstanding PC VR title when you're also tasked with making it a standalone title running on what we all know are glorified mobile chips? It's not an easy challenge, especially when you take into account just how demanding, how fickle, and frankly how entitled some gamers, including ourselves, can sometimes be. Of course we'll compare it to the first Asgards-drifts, even if we know that's unfair. Of course we'll want it to be better, even though we know it doesn't stand a chance graphically, especially when it also has to run on a Quest 2. And regardless of the resolution and frame rate bump that it just got on Quest 3. So how is it? Is it any good? If you're a Quest 3 owner, it doesn't really matter, does it? You get it for free anyway. But the real question is, for Quest 2 owners, is this a game you should pay $60 for? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Stick with us and let's see. Asgards-drifts 2 is great. It's fun, it's pretty, and it's big. It's really big. You know how Douglas Adams waxed lyrical about the size of the universe in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Well, okay, it's not that big. But for anybody who's been lamenting the bite-sized meals of most standalone VR titles, Asgards-drifts 2 feels huge. This fact slowly dawns on you as you play the first 2 hours and realize you've essentially just been introduced to the game. It hits you again once you've played for a few hours and finally get your first animal follower and start to realize you've barely scratched the surface of the 60+ hours of gaming it has to offer. It smacks you in the face when after all that, you realize that you've barely even spent much time in the whole roguelike sub-game that Sanzaru just decided to throw in because why the hell not? And in fact, Uncharted-drifts could have been, for most developers, a standalone game in its own right. It's just there. And Pete, for one, loves it. And who am I to argue with Pete? So, if it's value you're looking for, as a Quest 3 owner, well, it's Christmas and Meta is a big fat Santa cramming your headset with gameplay. And if you're a Quest 2 owner, you can't compete with Asgards-drifts 2 in terms of bang for the buck. You can try, but you'll fail. Gameplay wise, as if you didn't know this already, Asgards-drifts 2 is an action RPG with a divine twist. In the aftermath of Asgards-drifts, you're now a god of sorts, and you get to inhabit earthly heroes as you go about the business of finding and defeating the Norse trickster god Loki, who, well, tricked you. The game dispenses with the Norse environments, probably a good move after Asgards-drifts, God of War Ragnarok, AC Valhalla, and the inevitable Norse fatigue that might have set in for people. And it places itself firmly in Egypt, and features an appropriately Egyptian-pantheon. Sekhmet, Set, Isis, Horus, all those guys. You traverse the Great Sandsea, you explore ancient Egyptian temples, you fight reptilians right out of David Icke's catalog of demonic misfits, you solve puzzles by altering your perspective from mortal to godly, and you power up your human heroes as well as your animal followers. The combat in Asgards-drifts 2 feels really good and is mostly melee based. You can parry attacks, leaving your enemies open for a well-placed hit, and it's pretty satisfying to cleave your enemies in half and watch them fall apart like you're a ninja TikToker slicing fruits. You also get to throw your weapons at enemies and then retrieve them telekinetically. This ability is also used to solve some light switch hitting puzzles. It all works well, and between the sound design and the haptics, it feels really good. Once in a while, you'll come across a large area with a god station or a divine altar or whatever it's called, and this will allow you to shift between your giant divine size, allowing you to manipulate large objects, and the possession of your mortal hero. This is where most of the puzzle elements come into play, relying on switching between the two forms and taking advantage of each. These start off simple, introducing you to the basic concepts and then progressively getting more difficult, evoking some degree of head scratching. They're fun and provide a good break from the combat, which can at times start feeling repetitive. This is always a concern with long game times, that no matter how good the mechanics are, anything will start feeling repetitive after a few hours. To its credit, Asgard's Wrath 2 keeps things interesting, introducing new mechanics every now and then, new followers with new powers, and featuring a story that, although not quite gripping, is nonetheless interesting and populated with identifiably unique characters. In terms of presentation, it's hard to fault the game. Asgard's Wrath 2 is polished to a sleek shine. The game's UI is clean, good looking, and perhaps more importantly, always snappy. The recap that you can watch before you start the game proper is incredibly well done, with your character flying through a giant animated 3D diorama that's as informative as it is awesome to experience. The game's graphics, despite some necessarily low-resolution textures, are impressive overall, with fantastic art direction and detailed geometry in many of the environments. With its last update, the graphics are crisper on Quest 3, running at a higher resolution, and the frame rate is also a little bit higher than that on Quest 2, going from 72 to 90 Hz. Graphics on standalone are always a game of compromises. Get it good on Quest 3, but don't make Quest 2 suck. Make it look good, but keep the loading times down and keep the file size from hogging all the drive. You really can't win. What you can do is make something that's as good as it can be without breaking anything. And on that level, Asgard's Wrath 2 succeeds. Great graphics, expansive environments, and brisk loading times. Of course there are compromises made, but my personal opinion is that Sanzaru have found a superb balance and done a fantastic job. Audio-wise, the game pulls no punches. It's got a great soundtrack, great voice acting, and impeccable sound design. There's really not much to criticize here. The audio in the game makes everything feel solid and greatly enhances the overall feeling of presence and immersion. Now, this is a bit where I would usually bring up any issues I've got with a title, but to be perfectly honest, there's next to nothing to criticize with Asgard's Wrath 2, other than the fact that it doesn't fulfill some unreasonable fantasies that some might have expected from it. Yes, it doesn't look as good as the first game, but it can't. Yes, it didn't release with Quest 3 enhancements, but we've already got an update that goes some way towards that. The one glaring weakness might be the general lack of standard enemy variety, the profusion of the reptilians. But I'm not even close to halfway through the game at this point, so I don't know if that's an ongoing concern. In all cases, the game offers plenty of variety otherwise, with several playable characters, followers, puzzles, skill trees, and hours upon hours upon hours of gameplay. In fact, it's fair to say that unless you hate action RPGs with a vengeance or can't get over the graphical downgrade from PC VR quality graphics, you'll have a fantastic time with Asgard's Wrath 2. If you've got it for free with your Quest free, then it definitely helps validate the headset's purchase. And if you're on Quest 2, it's a great purchase that'll show you just how much that aging headset can still achieve. Asgard's Wrath 2 is an absolute triumph for Sanzaru Games, and it shows that Meta knew exactly what it was doing when it acquired the studio. Do we all secretly hope that they also release a cross-buy PC VR version so we can experience it that way as well? I'd be lying if I said no, but it was built to sell standalone headsets, and on that level, it absolutely delivers the goods. Asgard's Wrath 2 is standalone VR at its best. making a great release season even better, easily joining the ranks of great releases such as Assassin's Creed, Nexus, and Arizona Sunshine 2. If you've got a Quest 2 or 3, there's no better time to enjoy it, and if you haven't bought a headset yet, those free titles should have you seriously considering a purchase. With great graphics, fantastic combat, intelligent and varied puzzles, interesting mechanics, and an unrivaled scope, Asgard's Wrath 2 is an unmissable VR experience and a fantastic sequel that's impressive in all the ways that count. Well done, Sanzaru. Our provisional review score, because none of the team at 60OF have managed to finish the game yet, is 9.5 out of 10. Valhalla. Thank you for watching this review. If you've liked it, you know what to do. You're on YouTube, give us a like. If you want more of our content, give us a subscribe, and have an absolutely wonderful day.